Naval battles that shaped ancient civilizations. On a golden September morning in 480 BCE, King Xerxes of Persia settled onto his throne atop Mount Aigaleo, ready to watch his massive fleet crush the last remnants of Greek resistance in the narrow strait below. The most powerful man in the world was about to learn a lesson that would echo through millennia. The fate of empires often turns not on vast armies crossing continents, but on desperate gambles in confined waters where bold captains and clever admirals change the course of history. From that pivotal morning at Salamis to the fateful clash at Actium that birthed the Roman Empire, 5 naval battles would reshape the ancient world in ways that still ripple across time to us today. This is their story, a tale of sacred chickens tossed into the sea, of brilliant deceptions in Syracuse's great harbor, of Cleopatra's gilded flagship cutting through the foam off Actium's coast. It's a story of how Rome learned to rule the waves through costly failure, how Athens' reach exceeded its grasp, and how admirals from Themistocles to Agrippa mastered the art of maneuvering massive fleets in the wine-dark waters of the Mediterranean. But most of all, it's a story of how civilization itself pivoted on the skill of oarsmen, the wisdom of commanders, and the cruel fortunes of war at sea. The Battle of Salamis, a turning point for democracy. 100 Persian nobles tumbled from their ships, their scarlet robes billowing in the churning waters as Greek rams splintered their vessels against the cliffs of Salamis. King Xerxes, watching from his golden throne above, gripped its arms so tightly his knuckles whitened. He had expected to witness a massacre. Instead, he was watching his empire's dreams of conquest shatter against Athenian bronze and Greek cunning. The battle that would save Western civilization began with a lie. Themistocles, Athens' wiliest commander, had sent a trusted slave to the Persian camp with a false tale of Greek disunity and panic. "Strike now," the message urged, "before the Greek fleet disperses." Xerxes, convinced of his overwhelming superiority, his fleet outnumbered the Greeks nearly 3-1, eagerly took the bait. As Persian ships poured into the narrow strait between Salamis and the mainland under cover of darkness, they played directly into Themistocles' hands. Dawn revealed the trap. The confined waters negated the Persians' numerical advantage, turning their massive fleet into a confused tangle of ships struggling to maneuver. Greek triremes, their trained crews rowing in perfect unison, struck with devastating precision. The bronze rams at their prows, weighing nearly 2 tons, smashed Persian ships below the waterline. Others were forced against the rocks, where Greek marines leaped aboard, their armor glinting in the morning sun as they cleared enemy decks with brutal efficiency. Artemisia of Halicarnassus, the only female commander in Xerxes' fleet, saw the disaster unfolding and made a bold decision. To escape the chaos, she rammed and sank an allied Persian ship blocking her retreat. Xerxes, watching from above, mistook this for an act of valor against the Greeks and praised her courage, even as his fleet disintegrated before his eyes. By midday, the waters were thick with wreckage and bodies. The Persian survivors who made it to shore faced a grim welcome from Greek soldiers waiting on the beach. The significance of Salamis would echo far beyond that blood-stained afternoon. With his fleet broken, Xerxes could no longer supply his massive army in Greece. He retreated to Asia, leaving behind a force that would be crushed the following year at Plataea. But more importantly, the victory confirmed Athens' rise as the preeminent naval power in the Mediterranean. The wooden walls that Themistocles had convinced his fellow citizens to build had not only saved their city, they had laid the foundation for an Athenian golden age that would transform human civilization. Years later, Athenians celebrating their annual festival of victory would pour libations into the waters off Salamis, where fish still swam among sunken Persian timbers. They understood what modern admirals still teach, that command of the sea grants command of destiny. On that September morning in 480 BCE, a few hundred Greek ships in a narrow strait had proven that even the greatest empire could be humbled by superior strategy, skilled crews, and the courage to risk everything on a desperate gamble. The lesson would be repeated, with variations across centuries of Mediterranean warfare, but never with higher stakes than at Salamis, where democracy itself hung in the balance. The fall of Athens, hubris meets nemesis in Syracuse. The moon cast long shadows across Syracuse's great harbor as Athenian sailors whispered desperate prayers to Poseidon. Their mighty fleet, over 100 triremes that had once terrorized the Aegean, now huddled like prey against the harbor's northern shore. Above them, thousands of Syracusans had gathered on the cliffs with torches, ready to watch Athens' empire die. Gone was the confidence of 2 years earlier, when the largest expeditionary force ever assembled by a Greek city-state had set sail for Sicily. The swagger of Athenian imperialism had dissolved into desperation. Their commander Nicias, who had opposed the expedition from the start, now lay dying of disease in his tent as his men prepared for one final furious attempt to break free of the harbor that had become their prison. The Syracusans had learned well from their early defeats. Under the guidance of the Spartan commander Gylippus, they had constructed their own fleet using captured Athenian vessels as templates. More crucially, they had narrowed the harbor mouth with a barrier of chained ships, turning Athens' naval superiority into a liability. The confined space negated the Athenians' renowned maneuverability, reducing naval combat to a brutal contest of raw force. When battle was joined at dawn, the harbor erupted into chaos. Ships crashed together with such violence that rowers were knocked from their benches. The normal tactics of ramming and withdrawal proved impossible in the crowded waters. Instead, marines fought hand-to-hand across entangled vessels while archers on the harbor walls rained arrows into the packed mass of ships below. The water turned red as dying men pulled down their comrades in their desperation to stay afloat. The Athenian defeat became a slaughter. Those who weren't killed in the battle were hunted down in the subsequent retreat across Sicily. The lucky ones died quickly. The survivors were thrown into Syracuse's stone quarries, where they slowly perished from exposure and thirst. They scratched verses from Euripides' plays into the rocks, their final connection to the city they would never see again. Back in Athens, when news of the disaster finally arrived, the citizens refused to believe it. An empire built on naval supremacy couldn't comprehend such total maritime destruction. But the reality was stark. 40,000 men and over 100 ships, the flower of Athens' power, had vanished into the Western Sea. The disaster at Syracuse didn't just break Athens' military might, it shattered its sense of invulnerability. The city that had grown too proud to accept limits had finally found them in a distant harbor, where hubris met nemesis in the form of chained ships and stone quarries. The golden age that began at Salamis had set in Sicilian waters, leaving behind only poetry scratched in stone and lessons about the price of imperial overreach. Rome's naval transformation at Drepana. Publius Claudius Pulcher's face darkened as he watched the sacred chickens refuse to eat, a dire omen by Roman standards. His fleet of over 100 vessels lay ready for battle off Sicily's western coast, waiting to surprise the Carthaginian stronghold at Drepana. In a moment that would live in infamy, Pulcher snarled, "If they won't eat, let them drink," and hurled the holy birds into the Mediterranean's churning waters. The gods, it seemed, would have their revenge. As dawn broke, the Roman fleet's attempt at surprise dissolved into catastrophe. The Carthaginian admiral Adherbal, far from being caught unaware, had his crews already at their oars. His ships slipped out of Drepana's harbor in a perfect crescent formation, their bronze rams gleaming in the morning sun, while the Romans scrambled to untangle their disordered battle line. What followed was a masterclass in Carthaginian naval warfare. Adherbal's crews, born to the sea, demonstrated why Carthage had dominated Mediterranean waters for centuries. Their ships danced through the waves with lethal grace, executing the complex maneuvers their Roman opponents could only dream of. The Deicplus, sailing through gaps in the enemy line to shear off their oars, and the Periplus, outflanking and encircling isolated vessels, turned the waters off Drepana into a graveyard of Roman ships. Carthaginian sailors had a secret weapon beyond mere skill. Their ships were built for speed and maneuverability, with hulls sealed with lead sheathing and designs refined over generations of maritime warfare. The Romans, by contrast, were still learning the bitter lessons of naval combat. Their vessels, though sturdy, were essentially floating platforms for soldiers, built to carry the corvus, a heavy boarding bridge that proved worse than useless in rough seas. But it was in defeat that Rome's true character emerged. After losing nearly their entire fleet at Drepana, most nations would have abandoned maritime ambitions altogether. Rome instead launched one of history's most remarkable naval building programs. Within months, shipwrights along Italy's coast were constructing a new fleet, incorporating hard-learned lessons about ship design and naval tactics. The corvus was abandoned. Roman crews drilled endlessly in the complex maneuvers they had seen at Drepana, turning humiliation into expertise. Pulcher returned to Rome in disgrace, his name becoming a cautionary tale about hubris and impiety. Yet the battle that ruined him transformed Rome's approach to maritime power. They had learned that commanding the seas required more than courage and brute force. It demanded technique, technology, and respect for the ocean itself. The sacred chickens had taken their drink, but from their sacrifice emerged a naval power that would eventually surpass even Carthage's mastery of the waves. Drepana marked the end of Rome's maritime innocence and the beginning of its journey to become the Mediterranean's ultimate naval power. The greatest naval battle of antiquity, Cape Ecnomus. The Mediterranean had never seen anything like it. 680 quinqueremes, massive warships powered by 300 rowers each, faced off under the scorching Sicilian sun. The water trembled with the synchronized beat of over 200,000 oars. This was not just a battle, it was a clash of civilizations fought on an unprecedented scale. Marcus Atilius Regulus, the Roman consul, had devised a formation as innovative as it was audacious. His fleet adopted a shape never before seen in naval warfare, a giant triangle resembling a massive arrowhead aimed at Carthage's heart. At its point sailed the two enormous hexaremes carrying the Roman commanders, their bronze-sheathed rams leading the charge. Behind them, two long columns of ships formed the triangle's sides, with a fourth line stretching across the back, protecting their troop transports. The Carthaginian admiral Hamilcar countered with decades of naval expertise. His center deliberately weakened, designed to fold back like a sickle, drawing the Romans into a deadly trap. As the massive fleets converged, the sound of trumpets, war cries, and splintering wood echoed off Sicily's cliffs. The sea itself seemed to boil with the fury of thousands of oars churning the waters. When the lines met, physics and strategy collided in spectacular fashion. The sheer momentum of the Roman arrow formation split the Carthaginian center, but Hamilcar's wings swung around like giant doors, threatening to encircle the Roman fleet. For hours, The battle fragmented into hundreds of individual duels, with ships locked together in desperate combat. Experienced Carthaginian sailors found themselves matched against Roman marines who turned every ship into a floating fortress. The decisive moment came when Carthage's left wing, pursuing fleeing Roman ships, strayed too far from the main battle. The Roman reserve line, commanded by the wily Vulso, swept in behind them. Caught between multiple Roman formations, the Carthaginian ships were systematically destroyed or captured. The sea ran red with blood as Romans in heavy armor dragged Carthaginian sailors from their ships. As sunset approached, the surviving Carthaginian vessels fled toward the African coast, leaving behind a sea littered with wreckage, floating debris, and the bodies of thousands of sailors. The Romans had lost 24 ships completely sunk, while destroying or capturing 64 Carthaginian vessels. But the numbers told only part of the story. At Cape Icnomus, Rome had proven it could not only match Carthage ship for ship, but could innovate and execute complex naval maneuvers on a massive scale. The victory opened the way for Rome's first invasion of Africa, but its greater significance lay in what it represented: the complete transformation of Rome from a land-based power to a maritime empire. The farmers and shepherds who once feared the sea had become its masters, turning the Mediterranean into what they would soon call Mare Nostrum, our sea. At Cape Ecnomus, the future of the ancient world was written not in sand, but in water. The Battle of Actium, the birth of the Roman Empire. Dawn on September 2nd revealed two fleets facing each other across the glassy waters off Greece's western coast. On one side, Marcus Agrippa's sleek Liburnian galleys waited like wolves, their crews murmuring prayers to Neptune. On the other, Mark Antony's massive warships loomed like floating fortresses, their decks bristling with catapults and their towers packed with archers. At their center, gleaming in the morning sun, rode Cleopatra's flagship, its purple sails billowing and its deck plated with gold. The future of Rome hung in the balance. Octavian, watching from shore, had gambled everything on this moment. His Admiral Agrippa had spent months cutting off Antony's supply lines, forcing this confrontation. Now, his smaller but more agile ships would face Antony's behemoths, some up to 8 times larger than the Roman vessels, their wooden walls rising from the water like siege towers at sea. The battle began with an eerie silence as the fleets closed. Antony's massive ships moved ponderously through the water, their weight making them stable gun platforms for the artillery, but fatally slow. Agrippa's captains exploited this weakness mercilessly, their lighter craft darting in to launch burning projectiles before retreating from the larger ship's range. The sea began to fill with smoke, turning the morning bright with flame. By noon, the battle had devolved into a chaotic brawl of burning ships and desperate hand-to-hand combat. Then came the moment that changed history, a shift in the wind. Cleopatra, seeing an opening through the smoke, raised her purple sails and drove her squadron straight through the gap. Antony, spotting her departure, abandoned his flagship and command to follow her in a swift yacht, leaving his fleet leaderless and his soldiers dumbfounded at their commander's desertion. The aftermath was brutal. Many of Antony's men, realizing their leader had fled, fought on with suicidal courage. Others tried to surrender, only to find their ships so tall that Roman grappling hooks couldn't reach their decks. Some vessels burned for days, the flames visible from shores 50 miles distant. The sea around Actium remained black with ash for weeks. But the true significance of Actium lay not in the battle's spectacle, but in its aftermath. Out of the smoke and flame emerged a new political order, the Roman Empire. Octavian, soon to be known as Augustus, would transform the Republic into a monarchy in all but name. The Mediterranean would become a Roman lake, ushering in 2 centuries of unprecedented peace and prosperity, the Pax Romana. The last great naval battle of the ancient Mediterranean had been fought not between rival powers, but between competing visions of Rome itself. Antony's dream of an Eastern empire, ruled jointly with Cleopatra, had literally gone up in smoke. The future belonged to Octavian's Western-focused, traditionally Roman model. As the sun set on that September evening, it set not just on a battle, but on the entire Hellenistic age. The world that Alexander the Great had created 3 centuries earlier finally died at Actium, and from its ashes rose the Roman Empire, a political entity that would shape civilization for millennia to come. The enduring lessons of ancient naval warfare. Standing on the shores of Salamis today, watching fishing boats putter across waters where empires once clashed, it's easy to forget how the fate of civilization once turned on the skill of oarsmen and the cunning of admirals. Yet beneath these waves lie the ghostly remains of humanity's greatest naval battles. Splintered rams, shattered oars, and secrets that still whisper to those who study the art of war at sea. Each battle we've explored carved its own unique lessons into the bedrock of maritime strategy. Salamis taught us that confined waters are the great equalizer, where clever tactics can trump overwhelming force. Syracuse showed how quickly naval supremacy can evaporate when commanders fail to adapt to local conditions. Drepana proved that defeat, properly understood, can be more valuable than victory, but only for those humble enough to learn. Cape Ecnomus demonstrated how innovative formations can transform the very nature of sea combat. And Actium revealed that even the greatest naval battles are ultimately decided not by ships or weapons, but by the human element, the courage, wisdom, or folly of those who command. But perhaps the most striking lesson is how little has changed in 2 millennia of naval warfare. Modern admirals still grapple with the same fundamental challenges that faced Themistocles and Agrippa. The principles of concentration of force, maneuver in limited space, the importance of training and morale, these remain as relevant in the age of aircraft carriers as they were in the age of triremes. Even today's naval strategists study these ancient battles, finding in them eternal truths about leadership, innovation, and the complex relationship between sea power and empire. As climate change reshapes coastlines and new powers rise to challenge old orders, control of the seas remains as crucial as ever. The waters that witnessed these 5 great battles still carry the world's commerce, still shape international power, and still hold the key to global dominance. We would do well to remember that every empire in history has risen or fallen by its ability to command the waves. The sea remains what it has always been, humanity's greatest arena, where the fate of civilizations is decided not by the size of armies or the wealth of nations, but by the vision of leaders who understand its power and respect its mysteries. Like the sacred chickens that Pulcher cast into the sea at Drepana, the gods of naval warfare demand respect. Those who master their lessons rule the waves. Those who ignore them vanish beneath them, joining the eternal company of Persian nobles, Athenian marines, and Carthaginian sailors who learned too late that the sea brooks no hubris and forgives no mistakes.